Okay. Just quickly before I start, I'd like to give a special thanks to Hannah Excel, Jordan Rockford, and John Caserta for making all of this possible. Also, I'd like to give a special thanks to my Capstone advisors, Tony Johnson and Michelle Zager. I'm sorry I ghosted y'all. Um, my grandmother passed away at the top of this year. She was quite fond of me. Admittedly, I don't recall a ton of details from our relationship, but I'll always remember her house on a hill in the forest. Although I did not live there, looking back, that was my childhood home. I remember watching Jeopardy with her at 7 p.m. every weeknight, reading Stephen King on her couch over elementary school summer break, and her infamous chicken fricassee, which I later came to find out I was the only one who enjoyed. Although she may, oh wow, excuse me. Although she was maybe not a chef, my grandma was a teacher and an artist who wanted so many things for me. She would always go on about how she taught me the bones, and I recall drawing and painting under her tutelage. But perhaps the most salient was that she wanted me to become a Renaissance man. Merriam Webster defines a Renaissance man as a person who has wide interests and is expert in several areas. Think Leonardo da Vinci. Unbeknownst to her, I am not a Renaissance man. I'm not Da Vinci. My interests and expertise are extremely limited, yet somehow I'm a Brown RISD dual degree student. What she knew up until her final days was that I'm a Brown RISD dual degree student. I wish you could see me on this stage today, Graham, but I know you're smiling down on me. When I first got the news that I was accepted into the Brown RISD dual degree program, I felt a variety of emotions. I got the news in the middle of driver's ed, which ironically I had to walk home from. But during my walk, I played the song We Made It, a triumphant anthem by Soulja Boy and Drake. I know Drake is having a tough time right now, but it is a great song and I highly recommend. Anyway, that song captured the feeling of the moment. I had made it. Before me was a vast forest sprawling across the horizon. Huge green trees reached for the heavens. I was excited for what mystery and intrigue the forest had in store for me, and so I took a step forward. This high quickly faded, though, as I started to realize the immense weight of this title, Brown RISD Dual Degree. I realized the high expectations people had for me. I saw the envy in people's eyes. I didn't know if I was good enough. When I arrived on campus, these feelings only intensified as I met my cohort and saw how passionate and talented they all were and are. People carving out their own unique and elaborate niches in the arts and sciences. Brown RISD dual degree students, true Renaissance people. I'm not a Renaissance man. I came face to face with people who applied to and were rejected by the dual degree program, some of whom were extraordinarily gifted. I was not that. Despite the fact that I had the grades, the portfolio, the extracurriculars, I was not good enough. I am not a Renaissance man. I spent my first 3 years just trying to get through college without being exposed as a fraud. I didn't even tell anyone that I was a dual degree for like the first 2 years. The forest that just a short while ago seemed so intriguing and inviting was getting denser. Knotted vines hailed down from the canopy, and their leaves chased away any trace of blue in the sky. I was alone. I saw nothing. I saw no one. I played it safe. And because I was afraid to fail, I was afraid to fail. I was afraid to try. Who am I? I did not know. Act 2. I chose what I felt was a safe Brown major, and I chose what I felt was a safe RISD major. Initially, I chose econ and apparel, not because I was particularly passionate about those two fields, but because I wanted to be like my idol and role model, Glory Lee. Psych, nah. I chose I chose them because they sounded good together whenever I had to explain to people what I planned to do upon graduating from the program. And to a degree, because I had gaslit myself into believing that it would be easier to make a living with that combination than it would be to do what I was truly interested in. I was struck by how everyone seemed to have their whole life figured out. Truth be told, I did not, but I felt like I at least had to seem like I did. I found myself going through the motions. Just like a little sidebar. At some point, I switched econ out for psychology, a realm of study which felt far more relevant for me, but I was still more or less wondering. Some of the work I made was interesting, though, like my junior tailoring jacket. This piece I called a human jacket, with the concept being to invert the idea of a jacket, which is generally a protective outer layer, by revealing the delicate and soft musculature that normally must be protected, and instead letting it serve as a protector. This piece was a celebration of vulnerability, and while I was certainly being vulnerable with the piece, it wasn't really resonating. I still felt empty. Um, I was not getting the affirmation I needed, and in fact, I felt more alienated and isolated than ever before. I felt like I was not great. I felt worthless. I felt invisible. It was cold and dark. I saw nothing. I saw no one. I clawed my way through the shrubbery until I finally saw a clearing. I found myself standing over the edge of a cliff. I felt a chilling tailwind pushing me forward. I knew that I would not survive the fall, but the descent looked gorgeous. But for now, I just stood. My fourth year was spent on Brown campus without any main RISD concentration studios. In fact, all I took at RISD that year were the history of dress and knitwear. Um, at this point, I was almost completely checked out of everything. I did, however, have time to think. I reflected on my apparel practice and realized that although this was a safe choice, I did not feel safe. I did not feel at home. Something had to change. And all of a sudden, something did change. I don't remember what exactly was the catalyst because I wasn't taking notes 2 years ago in preparation for this very capstone performance. Um, and I have a notoriously questionable memory. But it was in part because I wanted to distance myself from apparel that painting reemerged into my life. Inspired by Kerry James Marshall's portrait of an artist as the shadow of his former self, and Ad Reinhardt's ultimate black paintings, I became interested in black as a color and an idea. I became interested in the temperature, texture, dimension, and humanity uh, of black. And this interest led me to create my final piece for my network class called A Portrait of the Artist as a Fashion Designer, which explored these themes and contrasted them against uniform weight that referenced ideas of production and conformity, ultimately rejecting the ethos of perfectionism and overproduction and productivity, and to a degree, apparel. I did not fully realize how pivotal this project was for me at the time, but this piece set the stage for my practice now. Act 3. Going into 2023, I realized that I really needed to reconnect with painting. So I started a project I loosely called 52 for 52 Freestyle, in which I tasked myself with making a new painting each week for the year, with the goal of getting back into the flow of painting consistently and trying to find my voice. Um, some of my explorations were decent, um, and I even had an article written in Hyperallergic about me and my project. Shout out to my dear friend Shanoa Baker for believing in me and writing about me. And shout out to Naya for letting me know that I was famous. but, but despite my newfound celebrity status, I still felt like my work was missing a lot. I was experimenting with a couple cool ideas, but it was unresolved, lacked direction, and lacked a certain weight. Nevertheless, I was starting to get confirmation that I was on the right track, and the view from atop the cliff started to shift. The tailwind dissipated and turned into an ambivalent breeze. As I searched for meaning in my life that could find its way into my art, I came back to this idea of blackness and my experience as a black man. I thought about my uncertainties and my identity as a black man and my blackness in the context of Brown and especially RISD. I became interested in this idea of double consciousness popularized by W.E.B. Du Bois, and specifically this idea of a veil that obscures blackness. In his essay of Our Spiritual Strivings, he writes, "The Negro is born with a veil and gifted with second sight in this American world, a world which yields him no true consciousness, but only lets him see himself through the revelation of the other world. It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder." Upon reading this passage, a lot of experiences and inner turmoil I had underwent were put into a greater context. I felt like I better understood myself and I understood where I needed to take my work. I had a lengthy background in portraiture and figuration and had experimented a little with abstraction, but now came the time to combine them. The idea was to obscure and even hide the person in the painting to the point where at first glance, and potentially even second and third glances, the person fades away into an abstract composition, referencing this feeling of dehumanization. The work was finally resonating with me and spoke to my experience. I realized that so much of my anxiety had to do with the fact that at any point, any of my accomplishments could be downplayed to affirmative action. At any point, any mistakes I made could be an excuse for people to vilify me and justify whatever prejudices they had already made against me. I realized that why I felt so lost and so alienated was because people couldn't really see me, but more importantly, I couldn't really see myself. I also realized that a lot of these same things, which in one context could harm me, could in another context protect and benefit me. I realized that I realized what I think I knew all along, which was that I didn't know anything. But perhaps not knowing is okay and is in fact the point. I finally understood this cliff I stood upon and this forest I was wandering through. I had been so distraught because the path wasn't clear, but the point is that there isn't one clear right path. The point is to keep moving, whether I can see my next step or not. But even more important, the point is to enjoy the walk, to enjoy the unsure footing, appreciate the moments when the vines slash my skin, Revel in the moments when the leaves block out the stars, just as much as when I can see clearly the path ahead. Feel the breeze against my skin. Smell the soil. Hear the leaves sing. Maybe to become a Renaissance man, one must embrace the uncertainty of the journey and learn as they go. If I am not yet a Renaissance man, I could become one with a little courage. Perhaps if I just try a little and trust the journey, who knows? Yeah, my paintings were on Vogue. That was that was a setup for that. Thank you. Um, but although I felt alone for so much of this journey, I really wasn't. I would not be here without the people who loved me, even when I could not love myself. I would not be here without the support of this beautiful cohort, a collection of some of the smartest and most talented, most kind people I've ever met. I'm proud to call each and every one of you my friends and family. I would not be here without my best friend Najari, who's always been there for me. Who took the time to teach me and believed in me. I would not be here without my father, who taught me calm and patience and to enjoy the journey. I would not be here without my mother, who made incredible sacrifices for me, and who reminds me how much she loves me each and every day. I would not be here without my sister and my best friend, Aaron, who has always been my number one fan and stayed up with me last night to help me figure out this speech. You deserve the world, Aaron. I will not be here without my gram, who knew I was special from the moment I was born. I'm forever grateful for each and every one of you. Bro, my voice sounds crazy. I'm forever grateful for each and every one of you. You all have my heart, and I hope to make you all proud. The last conversation I had with my grandma before she passed, we looked out at the forest behind her house. She told me she saw faces, people in the trees. I hadn't seen them before, but I think I understand now. Thank you.